The tweet landed like a thunderclap, sharp, loud, impossible to ignore. A photo of E.J. Johnson, radiant in a custom sequined suit, had been posted by a popular gossip account with a mocking caption, "When your dad's a legend, but you show up like a disco ball." Within minutes, it went viral. Thousands piled on, retweeting with cruel emojis, laughing faces, and worse. Comments laced with hate, judgment, and bitterness. E.J. had seen it before. He had grown up in the spotlight, used to whispers and headlines. But this one felt heavier. There was something about how quickly the hate had spread, how eagerly strangers shredded him without knowing the first thing about his heart. Before we dive deeper into this powerful journey of courage and family love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire and move you. To the outside world, E.J. Johnson is flamboyant, fearless, and endlessly stylish. The son of NBA icon Magic Johnson and businesswoman Cookie Johnson, he carved his own identity through reality television, fashion commentary, and bold self-expression. His confidence was often interpreted as defiance, his style as provocation. But to E.J., it was just truth, his truth, worn proudly. Yet even truth can be vulnerable. As the days passed, the mockery didn't slow. It escalated. News outlets picked up the tweets. Influencers added their 2 cents. The judgment was no longer confined to social media. It was on talk shows, podcasts, late-night jabs. Strangers spoke of him as if he were an idea, not a person. Behind closed doors, E.J. tried to maintain his usual grace. He posted a few uplifting quotes on Instagram, smiled through curated stories, kept his chin high. But something inside him began to crack. He lay in bed one night staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed every few seconds. Messages from friends, alerts from apps, comments he didn't ask to see. One thread stuck with him. Someone had written, "He's embarrassing his family. Magic must be ashamed." That line echoed in his chest. E.J. had always been proud of who he was, but this time he wondered if being visible was worth the cost. He remembered being 12, trying on his mom's heels when no one was home. He remembered the warmth in his father's voice when he first came out, the promise that he would always be loved no matter what. But that was then. Now it felt like the world was daring him to retreat. In public he remained polished, but in private his smile faltered. He turned off his phone for hours at a time. He cancelled a panel appearance. When his stylist called to check in, he let it ring. The pain wasn't loud. It was quiet, creeping. Every time he passed a mirror, he asked himself if maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to tone it down, to dress simpler, speak softer, shrink a little. Just enough to avoid the fire. But even thinking that made him feel like a stranger to himself. Late one afternoon, E.J. sat on his balcony, the Los Angeles skyline glowing orange in the sunset. He thought of all the kids watching him, hoping he'd keep shining so they'd have permission to do the same. And he thought of his parents. He hadn't told them how deeply this was hurting. He didn't want them to worry, but that silence too was becoming its own burden. Something had to give. Long before E.J. Johnson was a headline or a hashtag, he was simply a child surrounded by love. Magic and Cookie Johnson had created a home rooted in warmth, values, and devotion. Fame had its presence, but it never outshone their family bond. E.J. grew up in a world where the lights were always on. Games, cameras, events, but at home he was just their son. He was curious, expressive, and drawn to things others might have labeled different. But in the Johnson household, difference wasn't punished, it was cherished. Cookie had always seen something unique in E.J. From an early age, he showed a flair for fashion, an eye for elegance. He would arrange his stuffed animals by color, mimic her walk in the hallway, and insist on dressing himself, even if it meant wearing glitter shoes to a playdate. Magic, the towering NBA superstar, came from a different world. His own upbringing was strict, masculine, guarded. But becoming a father reshaped him. He wasn't just a legend on the court, he was learning to be a safe space off it. When E.J. came out to his parents as gay during his teenage years, he was terrified. He had rehearsed the words, braced for disappointment, but Cookie had only pulled him into her arms. "You are my baby," she whispered. "Nothing changes that." Magic had needed a moment, not out of rejection, but out of the fear he might not say the right thing. But what he said was simple. I love you. We'll figure this out together. Their love didn't make them perfect, but it made them ready to grow. In the years that followed, the Johnsons didn't just support EJ privately, they supported him publicly. When he chose to live openly, to explore gender expression, to dress boldly, they never flinched. Cookie stood by his side at events. Magic spoke proudly about him in interviews. They were present, vocal and unshakable, and yet even with their support, the world wasn't always kind. EJ had faced ridicule before, from classmates, strangers, even journalists. Each time the sting reached the family. Cookie would cry in silence, Magic would pace the house, fists clenched. But through every blow they reminded EJ, he was never alone. Now with the latest wave of cruelty crashing over him, those memories returned like shadows. Magic watched the headlines with unease. The way people dissected his son, mocked his walk, twisted his joy into comedy, it made his stomach turn. He remembered the promise he had made years ago, to stand by EJ no matter what. But now he wondered if his silence was enough. Cookie scrolled through comments at night, alone in bed. She didn't cry this time, she just sat there still, hurt, angry, protective. They both sensed something shifting, not in the public, but in EJ himself. He was quieter, less present. When Cookie called, he kept the conversations short. When Magic texted, replies came late. They didn't want to press him. They knew EJ's independence was part of his pride, but they also knew when their son was hurting. One evening, Cookie brought it up. He's slipping away a little, Irvin. Her voice trembled. Magic nodded. We have to bring him back. Their house, once filled with EJ's laughter, now echoed with concern. They could feel it, the weight he carried, the silence he hid behind. They didn't have a plan yet, but they knew they wouldn't let the world crush him. Not now, not ever. Love had brought them this far, and it would carry them through whatever came next. The silence grew thicker with each passing day. EJ, once so present, had faded into a quieter version of himself. His Instagram went dark. The glamour, the sparkle, the steady stream of self-affirming posts, all gone. His closest friends grew concerned, texting with no replies. Invitations went unanswered. The boy who once lit up every room now let days pass without opening the curtains. The world outside kept spinning, but EJ was still. One morning he woke up to sunlight spilling across the floor but didn't move. The messages had stopped flooding in, not because people forgot, but because the buzz moved on. Still, the damage lingered. EJ had stopped reading the comments, but the words stayed with him. He scrolled through old photos, the Met Gala, the Pride event in West Hollywood, the family vacation in Italy. He zoomed in on his own face, trying to find something. Maybe a sign of naivety, maybe the old version of himself. All he saw was exhaustion behind the eyes. There was a knock at the door. He ignored it, but the knocking continued, steady, patient. Eventually he got up and opened it. Magic stood there, hands in his pockets, a familiar crease on his brow. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at his son. EJ, wrapped in a hoodie 3 sizes too big, eyes swollen from a sleepless night, didn't flinch, but he didn't smile either. "Hey," Magic said. EJ stepped aside. They sat in silence for a while. The weight of all the unsaid things filled the room. "I've been worried," Magic finally said. "I know," EJ replied, barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to," Magic continued. "But if there's something you need, I'm here always." EJ hesitated, then looked up. "It's not just the hate, Dad. It's the idea that no matter how much I show up as myself, people still want to tear it down." Magic nodded. "I wish I could take that pain from you." "You can't," EJ said, "and sometimes I wonder if you regret having to defend me all the time." Magic's eyes welled. "Never. Don't you ever think that. You're the bravest person I know. I just hate that the world doesn't see what I see." They sat together, silence folding around them like a blanket. For the first time in days, EJ didn't feel completely alone. That evening, Cookie arrived. She'd brought EJ's favorite, lemon cake from the bakery down the street. She didn't speak right away either, just kissed his forehead and held his hand. After dinner, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this a while ago," she said. "Meant to give it to you, but I didn't know if it was the right time." EJ unfolded the letter. Her handwriting danced across the page. She wrote about the first time he walked, how his laugh filled rooms, how proud she was the day he came out, not because of what he said, but because of how courageously he said it. Tears came quickly. "I love you," she said. "Every piece of you. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." In that moment, the room softened. The pain didn't vanish, but it lifted enough to breathe again. EJ looked at both his parents, no longer trying to be strong, and they didn't ask him to be, they just stayed close, together. The next morning, something shifted. Not dramatically, not in a blaze of glory, but subtly, like the first breeze after a long heat wave. EJ opened his laptop, stared at the blank screen for a while, and then began to type. He wasn't sure what he was writing at first. A caption, a letter, a release. All he knew was that he needed to say something, not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever felt small in the face of public cruelty. Later that evening, Magic and Cookie sat beside him as he hit post. Magic's message appeared first. It read, "My son EJ is one of the kindest, strongest, most authentic people I've ever known. The way he carries himself, with grace, style, and truth, makes me proud every single day. We live in a world that still fears difference, but love is louder. EJ, I stand with you, always." Cookie followed minutes later with a thread of family photos. EJ as a toddler, beaming in oversized sunglasses, EJ at his high school graduation, EJ helping her decorate the Christmas tree, laughing. Her words were simple but powerful. If you knew his heart, you'd never judge his wardrobe. EJ shines from within, and he's never needed permission to be extraordinary. EJ didn't add much, just a quiet message on Instagram over a black background. Still here, still me, still loving. Within hours, the tone online began to shift. Major outlets picked up the story. Not the ridicule, but the response. Articles with headlines like "Magic Johnson defends son with powerful statement of love" began circulating. Activists and public figures reposted Cookie's thread. LGBTQ+ youth organizations voiced support. Hashtags that once trended with mockery now filled with solidarity. In EJ's inbox, the tide had turned. Messages from strangers flooded in, not with hate but gratitude. Young people who'd never spoken about their identities wrote long paragraphs thanking him for being visible. Parents reached out, asking how to be better allies to their own children. One note simply read, "Your strength gave me mine." EJ read every message slowly, letting them soak into the bruised parts of him. He knew the internet could be fickle. Praise could disappear as fast as ridicule. But this wasn't about chasing applause. It was about reclaiming space. He started to feel something he hadn't in weeks: hope. A week later, EJ made his first public appearance since the incident. It wasn't a red carpet or a fashion event. It was a youth conference for LGBTQ+ teens in downtown LA. Quiet, informal, safe. The organizers had invited him with no expectation he'd attend. He stood in front of them, no flash, no glamour, just truth. "I thought about disappearing," he admitted. "I thought maybe the world would be happier if I toned it all down. But then I remembered, I didn't come this far to shrink." The room was silent, listening, not to a celebrity, but to a human being who had walked through fire and come out, not untouched, but unashamed. He continued, "Being who you are is not always easy, but the love around you can be stronger than the hate. My parents reminded me of that. You have to believe that your truth is enough." They applauded, not because of what he wore or how he looked, but because of what he gave them: courage. Later, when asked if he was back, EJ smiled gently. "No," he said. "I never left. I just had to remember who I was." And with that, the healing began in earnest, not just for EJ, but for all who saw little of themselves in his light. Weeks passed, and the world moved on as it always does. The cycle of online outrage spun toward new targets, new trends. But something had changed. For EJ, for his family, and for the people who'd watched the story unfold. EJ wasn't trying to go back to who he was before. That version of him had been strong, but also exhausted from always performing resilience. Now he chose something deeper, peace. He still dressed boldly, still smiled in interviews, but there was a calm behind it. He no longer felt the need to prove anything. The ridicule that once threatened to silence him had instead clarified who he was and who he wasn't. He wasn't a trend. He wasn't a symbol for others to twist. He was simply himself, and that, he now knew, was enough. At home, the Johnsons grew even closer. Their kitchen table conversations stretched longer. Laughter returned, not as a mask, but as a truth. Magic started showing up to more of EJ's events, not just as a parent, but as a visible ally. Cookie began working with organizations focused on LGBTQ+ youth, using her voice to build bridges between families and children navigating identity. They had always loved their son, but now they loved with new intention, louder, firmer, more openly. One evening, EJ shared a moment with Cookie on the back patio, stars blinking over the Los Angeles sky. "You always believed in me," he said. "I saw you before the world did," she replied. "And I'll keep seeing you no matter what." EJ nodded. "I want to help others feel that. The ones who don't get this kind of support, I want them to know they're not alone." And that's exactly what he began to do. He started mentoring queer youth, especially those of color. He spoke at schools, shelters, and support centers, not as a celebrity, but as someone who had walked through pain and found his way back to light. His story wasn't wrapped in perfection. It was messy, human, real. That's what made it powerful. People no longer spoke about the tweet. It had been buried by time, by growth, by love. But the ripple it caused left something lasting, an understanding of what family looks like when it shows up fully. EJ's journey reminded the world that being visible is an act of courage, and being loved through that visibility is a kind of salvation. The hate didn't win. It never really stood a chance. To those watching, maybe struggling with their own reflection, EJ's life stands as proof. Your truth is not a flaw. Your light is not a liability. You are allowed to exist loudly, proudly, fully. And to parents, it speaks a deeper truth. Your love has the power to armor your children in ways the world never can. So wherever you are, whatever you're facing, let this story be a reminder. You are not alone. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and make sure to click the video on your screen now. There's another powerful story waiting to inspire you.